V'asuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham. One of the most famous verses in the Torah from Parshat Terumah. You shall make for me a sanctuary, and I shall dwell within you. This is the original mitzvah to have a place dedicated to the service of Hashem. Originally the Mishkan, the tabernacle, later the Beit HaMikdash, the temple, and then when we went into exile, as the prophet Yechezkel says, we would have a mikdash mi'at. We would have a small sanctuary, a shul, a yeshiva, a Beit Midrash. In the last year, we've hardly had services because of coronavirus. And even now that we're back, the shul services are very small. There isn't much of a crowd. People are afraid. And we have to pause for a moment and consider what shuls mean to us, especially here in the diaspora. The famous Rabbi Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, the advocate of Orthodoxy in Germany in the 19th century, famously said that if he had the power, he would close all shuls and Jewish schools for 100 years. Why would he do such a radical thing? To ensure that the people involved with shuls and schools would have no choice but to build Jewish homes. What Rabbi Hirsch was saying is that in his days in Germany, because of the growth of the Reform movement, everybody had localized their service of God, their worship of God, to the shul. That's where they were Jewish. That's where they did Jewish things. Outside of the shul, they didn't. But it was never that way. The shul was a reflection of religiosity, always. It wasn't where one drew one's religiosity from. And he said, today, everything about Judaism is the shul, the shul, the school, the school. But what about a Jewish home? That's where Jewish values are nurtured. And if you think of the verse we started with, V'asuli mikdash, make for me a sanctuary, v'shachanti betocham, and I shall dwell within them. The Torah doesn't say, I will dwell within it. If you make me a shul, then this should then filter out to the rest of your life, to your home, to your business, and I will dwell within you. In a very beautiful sermon that the late Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb of Yeshiva University gave, he said that there is a vast difference between shuls in the land of Israel today and shuls in the diaspora. In Israel, in the religious community, people do not draw their spirituality, their religiosity from the shul. They draw it from their home, from their schools. It's strong. And therefore their shuls are strong. They don't need the shul to give them that spirituality. Very often a shul in Israel is just a place where you go to pray. You don't necessarily socialize or have something to eat. You want to go out and you want to pray. And therefore he says that it is in fact a thermometer. It's a measure of the level of religiosity in the community. But in the diaspora, very often, it's from the shuls that we draw all of our connection to Hashem. The shul is in fact a thermostat. It is the one that's providing the heat, the temperature. And therefore when the shuls are not strong, then people's religiosity disappears. And this, of course, has been one of the difficulties throughout Corona. People have not been able to come to shul. And therefore their religiosity has weakened because all of it came specifically from attending shul. Yes, we have been able to do many, many events on Zoom, but it's not quite the same as when we do it in person. And therefore we ought to remember this verse and those famous words of Rabbi Hirsch. V'asuli mikdash, make for me a sanctuary, make for me a shul, v'shachanti betocham. But I want to dwell within you, wherever you may be, specifically in the Jewish home. I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.